Emily opened her eyes to the bright sunlight streaming through the bedroom windows. She was over 40, but in the reflection of the mirror, she saw a woman who could easily pass for 10 years younger. Thanks to genetics and years of training, her body remained toned, her skin was smooth, and her face was fresh. Despite the compliments she often received from friends and clients, Emily could not get rid of the emptiness inside. She lived in a small house on the outskirts of Los Angeles, where every corner was filled with memories of her life with she. They lived together for 23 years, enough to go through ups and downs together, but lately their relationship seemed to be withering. She was busy with his university career, often withdrawn into himself, and their sex life had long since become routine. They were once a passionate couple, but now their meetings in bed have become rare and mechanical. Emily began to feel somehow uneasy around her husband, as if they were both stuck in a life that had long since lost its former luster. Emily lay on the bed alone, staring at the ceiling. She had been on a business trip for 3 weeks. She knew that these trips were not just work. Vague suspicions about his infidelity were confirmed one day when she accidentally noticed a tender message on his phone, but then she decided not to make a fuss. She didn't know how to confront this. The fear of losing her husband was mixed with her own feelings of guilt. Maybe if they had children, things would be different. These thoughts haunted her every time she looked at her friend's children. She had never discussed this issue seriously, and now Emily often wondered if she had missed this chance forever. There were no children, and the emptiness left by this decision only grew. During these 3 weeks of solitude, Emily began to notice her neighbor, the young and attractive Jacoby. He was 10 years younger than her, had just graduated from university, and was starting a career in technology. At first, they only greeted each other from afar, but every day their short meetings became longer and longer. Jacoby was full of life. His enthusiasm infected Emily, and she found herself enjoying his attention. Emily never thought about cheating on she, but the situation became more and more complicated every day. Jacoby began to come to her home more and more often, helping with the housework and giving her compliments. In his eyes, Emily saw something that she had not noticed in the eyes of her husband for a long time: admiration and passion. With each new meeting with Jacoby, Emily felt more and more awkward. She noticed how her body responded to his presence, how her heart began to beat faster, how her hand lingered a little longer on his shoulder when greeting him. She couldn't help but think that this young man looked at her differently than all the other men her age. There was no indifference or boredom in his gaze. He greedily caught her every movement, as if studying her with an interest that she had not seen in she's eyes for a long time. One day, when Jacoby came to help Emily move several boxes of things into her garage, their hands touched longer than usual. He looked at her seriously, but with a slight smile that made her skin crawl. "You look beautiful," he said, tilting his head slightly, his voice quiet, almost a whisper. Emily froze for a moment. She didn't know how to answer. This compliment, given with such sincerity, awakened long-forgotten feelings in her. A struggle broke out inside her. She knew it was wrong. Jacoby is much younger than her, and she is married to she. But didn't she himself break the oath of allegiance? Doesn't that make everything fair? Emily tried to take a step back, literally and figuratively, to regain some distance. But thoughts of Jacoby had already begun to take root in her mind. That evening, she lay awake for a long time, looking at the ceiling, turning over all the events of the last weeks in her head. She tried to convince herself that it was just anxiety from loneliness, that as soon as she returned, everything would fall into place. But after a few days, everything changed. One day, when Emily was going for a run on the beach, she met Jacoby again. This time, their conversation was longer. He started talking about his dreams, how he had always wanted to live on the coast, enjoying the simple pleasures of life. Emily listened to him, plunging into his world of youth and freedom, a world that she herself had long ago left. Jacoby looked so alive, so full of energy, and his optimism infected her. "Have you ever felt that life could give more?" he suddenly asked, stopping and looking straight into her eyes. "What else is there that you haven't experienced?" Emily didn't know what to answer. These words struck to the heart. She really thought that her life was missing something important. She loved she, but she felt that something had broken between them. And here in front of her stood a young, attractive man who seemed to embody her hidden desires. At that moment, a silence arose between them, which was more telling than any words. There was hidden tension, unexpressed desire, and fear of the inevitable. Emily realized that if she didn't stop now, her relationship with Jacoby would go beyond just flirting. But she didn't stop. They made eye contact, and that was enough. Jacoby stepped closer, his hand gently touching her shoulder, as if checking if she was ready to take this step. Emily didn't look away. She closed her eyes, and a second later she felt his lips on hers. The kiss was short, but it contained all the accumulated passion, all the energy that had been smoldering inside them for the last few weeks. They both knew that this moment would change everything, but it was already impossible to stop. After that meeting, Emily was overcome with mixed feelings. She was overcome by doubt, guilt, and fear. What if she finds out? But this fear was muffled by some strange feeling of liberation. For the first time in a long time, she felt alive. But she was still in her thoughts. One evening, while she was lying in bed, her phone lit up a message from She. He wrote that he would soon return from a business trip. These words seemed to bring her to her senses like a cold shower. She suddenly realized that everything that happened with Jacoby could no longer be just a casual or innocent flirtation. It was real, and it had consequences. At that moment, she was overcome with a feeling of panic. She knew something needed to be done, but she didn't know what. She had to decide whether it was worth destroying her entire life for one moment of passion or returning to her old life, where everything was stable but without fire. But fate has already made its choice for her. She always considered himself a man of discipline and order. His university career was built on determination, hard work, and the pursuit of excellence. Over the years, he rose through the ranks and now occupied a key position influencing decisions that affected the academic future of many students. On the outside, his life seemed ideal: a successful career, a beautiful house in a prestigious area of Los Angeles, an intelligent and attractive wife. It would seem that she had everything one could dream of. But internally, he felt that he was losing control over his own life. His marriage to Emily was an important part of his success. They were once an ideal couple. Passion, understanding, and love accompanied them at every stage. But as they grew older and his career became more demanding, she noticed a wall beginning to form between them. Their communication was limited to everyday issues: bills, work, Emily's training. Sex life had virtually disappeared, reduced to rare, almost obligatory meetings without the spark they had experienced in the early years of marriage. She loved Emily, but this love was more like respect or even habit. He knew she was an important part of his life, but the passion that once fired him had long since faded. Business trips became a kind of escape for him from this routine. He could lose himself in his thoughts, immersing himself in his work, avoiding those awkward moments when he realized that he and Emily were no longer the same people they used to be. It was on one of these business trips that he met Lilia. Lilia was younger, more energetic, and had a fire in her that she had not felt in Emily for a long time. They met at one of the university events. Lilia was a visiting teacher, and from the very first conversation there was chemistry between them. She knew it was wrong, knew that his attraction to her was more than just friendly interest. But Lily was a breath of fresh air for him. She admired his achievements, listened to him with interest, and, unlike Emily, always found the time and desire to discuss his work. Their connection began as friendly meetings, dinners after long working days, when they discussed scientific projects and shared ideas. But over time, these meetings became more and more intimate. Lilia began to spend more and more time with She, not only discussing academic matters, but also giving compliments that boosted his ego. She saw him as a man, not just a teacher or colleague. She knew that his relationship with Lilia was a dangerous game, but he couldn't stop. In her arms he felt young, desired, and free from all the responsibilities that his marriage to Emily had imposed on him. Lily gave him something that he had not experienced with his wife for a long time: excitement, passion, a feeling of novelty. However, despite this connection, she could not leave Emily. He felt guilty for cheating on his wife, but at the same time he could not refuse what Lilia brought to his life. It was an internal conflict that was tearing him apart. She knew that deep down he was still attached to Emily, but he was too weak to resist the temptation. The 3-week deployment came to an end, and she knew it was time to return home. Usually, he was happy to return to the house, which was a symbol of stability for him, but this time his thoughts were occupied with Lilia. He was already planning how he would see her after he returned, even though their meetings outside of business trips would become more difficult. When she entered the house, he felt a strange atmosphere, as if something had changed. Emily greeted him with a smile, but he noticed that her gaze had become somehow different. She seemed more confident in herself, and there was something new in her behavior that he could not recognize. It was exciting and a little worrying. Perhaps she knew something. Later that evening, when she went into the bathroom, he left his phone on the nightstand. Emily was in the bedroom, and when he returned, he noticed that her eyes were glued to the screen of his phone. She cringed internally. What did she see? He knew that SMS from Lilia could reveal his secret. But Emily didn't say anything. She looked calm, although the tension in the air could be cut with a knife. She did not know that at that very moment a young neighbor was hiding in the bedroom closet, with whom his wife had already crossed the line a few weeks ago that she himself had crossed long ago. And so, now both spouses were involved in something more than just an affair. Their marriage, which seemed so strong on the outside, was cracking at the seams. Emily looked at She's phone screen, where a text message flashed on the screen. "I can't wait for the next meeting." Emily's heart beat faster, but she didn't feel angry. Instead, a strange feeling of relief came over her. Now she knew for sure she really cheated on her. At that moment, her own relationship with Jacoby ceased to be a sin, but became something equal. If she allowed himself a mistress, why couldn't she allow herself something more? Emily slowly put the phone back on the nightstand, pretending she didn't notice anything. She returned to the bedroom with the usual mask of serenity on his face, but his calmness did not reassure her. Now she knew that everything had changed. She also felt something, as if the atmosphere in the house had become different, but did not know that Jacoby, supposedly accidentally forgotten in the closet, was watching their every move. She couldn't understand what exactly had changed in Emily's behavior. She no longer asked him questions about the business trip, did not complain about loneliness, but there was something new in her gaze, a certain feeling of confidence. Her usual reserve gave way to a strange mystery, which began to alarm him. Meetings with Lilia continued. Every time they saw each other, Lilia seemed more and more passionate, more and more interested in their relationship. But she gradually began to realize that the connection with Lily no longer gave him the same pleasure. On the contrary, every time he saw her, he had the feeling that he was not free, that his betrayal was consuming him. He began to fear that things might go too far, but Lilia did not back down. She demanded more time from him, more meetings, and she did not know how to break off this relationship. One evening, a few days after she had returned, she and Emily were sitting at dinner. He was surprised at how calm and confident she looked. This new Emily puzzled him. Suddenly, in the middle of the meal, she looked him straight in the eye and said, "I want to discuss something." He froze, feeling anxiety growing inside him. "I think we should be more honest with each other," Emily continued, putting her fork down on her plate. "I know that there is no longer the same passion between us. You and I have grown apart, and it seems that I'm not the only one who noticed it." She began to fiddle with the napkin nervously, not knowing how to react. "What do you mean?" he asked, trying to remain calm. Emily smiled slowly, but her smile was cold. "I saw your SMS. You've been cheating on me for a long time, haven't you?" His heart sank, and he felt a cold sweat on the back of his neck. But before he could say anything, Emily continued. "But you know, I don't play by the rules anymore either. And if you want to continue leading your double life, I suggest we change our marriage." He couldn't believe his ears. "What do you mean?" he asked, tense. "An open relationship," Emily said calmly. "You can continue sleeping with other women if you want." but I will also do what I want." These words shocked she. He always perceived his infidelities as something secret that should not have affected their marriage. But now Emily was offering him freedom, and she was cold, almost indifferent. She didn't know what to say. He was not ready for his wife to have the same freedoms that he gave himself. But what shocked him most was her confidence. It was as if she had already made this decision a long time ago. She felt like he was losing control of the situation. "Are you serious?" he finally squeezed out. "Quite," she answered. "I don't want to lie to you anymore, and you don't have to lie to me. But there is one condition: no feelings, only physical connection, no romantic interests." She looked at her, trying to figure out how to react. On the one hand, it was a tempting offer that gave him legitimacy for his relationship with Lilia. On the other hand, the thought of Emily being with another man was painful for him. Emily, meanwhile, knew she had made the right move. She had no intention of revealing the truth about Jacoby, but her proposal was a strategy. She knew she was losing her, and now she wanted to regain control. Her relationship with Jacoby was her little secret that she kept to herself. Jacoby was still a part of her life, and she had no intention of giving him up. Their meetings became increasingly passionate, but they also became even more secretive. Emily understood that her connection with Jacoby was more than just sex. She felt that Jacoby brought something new into her life, a feeling of freedom, youth, and even power over the situation. One day, when they met again at her house, Emily told him about her proposal to she. "Do you seriously want to do this?" Jacoby asked, still amazed at her composure. "I already did," she answered, looking into his eyes. "But she doesn't know everything." Jacoby was silent, aware that he was part of a more complex game than he had thought. But this only excited him more. He understood that Emily was not a woman who could be controlled. Now it has become their common secret. Several weeks passed, and the situation escalated. She continued his relationship with Lilia, but their connection became more distant. Emily, for her part, enjoyed the new dynamic with Jacoby. However, everything changed dramatically when Lily knocked on the door of their house one evening. When she opened the door and saw Lily on the threshold, he felt a strange mixture of fear and foreboding. Lily stood in front of him, and her face reflected a seriousness that did not bode well. "We need to talk," she said again, already entering the house without waiting for an invitation. She felt anxiety growing inside him. He quickly glanced over his shoulder, making sure Emily wasn't nearby. They had already begun to play the dangerous game of an open relationship, but he was not prepared for Lilia to begin invading their personal space. "Lily, wait," he began, closing the door behind her. "This is not the place to talk. Let's meet later." But Lily was not going to leave. She looked him straight in the eyes. Her voice was quiet but intense. "I'm pregnant." These words sounded like a bolt from the blue. She froze. Everything was mixed up in his head, as if thousands of thoughts were crashing into each other, causing chaos. "Pregnant? How is this possible?" Questions were rushing from his mind, but he could not immediately find the right words. He wasn't ready for this. "Are you sure?" His voice trembled, and he himself was surprised by this. Is this my child?" Lily chuckled irritably, her eyes narrowed. "Of course yours. Was I with someone else? We've been dating for 6 months now," she. "Did you really think this would just go away?" His heart was pounding dully in his chest. Pregnancy? How could he let this happen? Now things have become even more complicated. An open relationship with Emily seemed like a way for him to escape the destruction of their marriage, and Lily was his escape from routine. But now he was trapped, and he knew that this news would destroy everything that he and Emily had tried to preserve. Little did Emily know that a conversation was taking place downstairs that would completely change her life. She continued going about her business until she heard muffled voices. Her heart sank when she realized it was Lily's voice. She couldn't believe her ears. How did this woman dare to come to her house? Emily quietly walked up to the stairs and froze when she heard Lilia's last words. "I'm pregnant." These words sounded like a shot. At that moment, her world turned upside down. She felt the blood drain from her face. Pregnant? She will become a father, but not from her. Emily felt her heart clench with pain, anger, and shock. She allowed him to have freedom in the relationship, but it was too much. Gathering all her will, Emily went downstairs and, opening the door, entered the room. Lily turned to her, her eyes narrowing instantly. "What are you doing here?" Emily asked coldly, feeling how everything was boiling inside her. She stood aside, unsure of what to do, but Emily saw his frightened expression. "I think we both have the right to be here," Lilia answered defiantly, her voice as sharp as a knife blade. Emily approached she, her eyes filled with anger, and, unable to resist, she hissed, "Did you allow this to happen? Did you let her get pregnant?" She opened his mouth, trying to say something, but couldn't. His helplessness was too obvious. Lily, on the contrary, did not experience any fear. She was confident in her position. "He didn't plan this," Lilia said, her gaze directed at Emily, "but it happened. And I'm not going to give up on this child." Emily was speechless for a moment. Lilia's pregnancy was a blow she could not have foreseen. She slowly turned to she, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "You are ruining our lives. Do you understand this?" She lowered his head, unable to meet her gaze. He didn't know what to say. A real storm broke out inside him, but he felt helpless. Meanwhile, Jacoby kept a low profile as he watched the drama unfold. He understood that this was his chance. Lilia's pregnancy is exactly the turn that could destroy Emily and she's marriage. He had seen how Emily had changed in recent weeks. Her connection with she became even more fragile, and their relationship became more and more like an illusion. Jacoby hoped that now that Emily found out about Lilia's pregnancy, she would understand that her marriage was a lie. He didn't want to share Emily with another man. Jacoby dreamed that they could be together, without secrets, without she. Now everything depended on her decision. He approached her as she stood in the doorway after the scandal with she and Lilia. Emily looked haggard, her eyes full of pain and anger. Jacoby gently took her hand, and she turned to him as if she saw salvation. "Emily," he said quietly, his voice full of tenderness, "I'm here. You can walk away from it all." Emily looked at him, feeling the emotions bursting inside her. Her marriage was crumbling before her eyes, but she didn't know what to do. Jacoby was young, full of life, and she knew that with him she could start again. But is she ready to give up she completely? "I don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice filled with despair. "Get away from him," Jacoby insisted, squeezing her hand tighter. "He destroyed everything you had. Now is your chance to start over. With me." These words pierced her heart. Jacoby was right. Her life with she had turned into chaos, and Lilia's pregnancy was the last straw. But could she really leave everything behind? Could she start a new life with a young neighbor who offered her freedom and passion? After the door slammed behind Lily, an oppressive silence reigned in the house. Emily stood motionless, feeling her heart squeezing. The silence that followed the stormy meeting was deafening. She sank into a chair, staring at his hands as if they held the answer to everything. Both were silent, but the tension in the room was growing like a storm cloud ready to explode. Emily was the first to break the silence, her voice filled with anger and disappointment. "Did you let this happen? Pregnancy?" Her voice trembled, but there was a cold, almost steel tone in it. "We agreed on an open relationship, but this." She slowly raised his head, his face twisted with guilt and fatigue. "I didn't plan this, Emily," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. "It happened by accident." Emily growled, her eyes flashing with anger. "Accidentally?" Her voice became louder, almost a scream. "You cheated on me with her behind my back, and now you say it was accidental? Do you understand that this will destroy everything we had?" She stood up abruptly, clasping his head in his hands, his voice filled with fatigue cutting through the silence. "I thought we found a solution. You suggested an open relationship, Emily. You're with him too. With this Jacoby." Emily flushed, her face filled with anger. "Yes, I suggested it, but I never thought that you would go this far. We agreed no feelings, no affection, And now you are expecting a child from another woman. She finally looked into her eyes, his voice becoming sharp. Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I need this? I don't know what to do, Emily. Everything got out of control. He was silent for a moment, but then continued, lowering his head. I don't want to lose you. Emily laughed a short, bitter laugh in which there were notes of despair. It's too late. You and I have lost each other a long time ago, she. You know that yourself. We both tried to save our marriage with these rules, but they were not salvation. This is self-deception. She nervously ran his hand through his hair and sat back down in his chair, sighing heavily. He avoided her gaze again, but now there was hopelessness in his voice. What should I do, Emily? His voice was almost a whisper. I'm confused. I don't know what's right. Emily froze in place, feeling conflicting emotions tearing her apart. She hated him for making such a mistake, but at the same time she couldn't deny her own role in bringing their marriage to this point. We're both to blame, she finally whispered, lowering her head. I proposed an open marriage, thinking that it would save us, but we were both mistaken. Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly held them back. Emily didn't want to show how deeply this situation hurt her. She looked up, his voice trembling. I can't just leave her, Emily. This is not just an affair. Now we will have a child, and I have to take responsibility. These words were like a knife in the heart. Emily felt her breathing become uneven. Responsibility? She repeated in disbelief. What about responsibility to me? Before our marriage, you left me before Lily got pregnant. She tried to object, but couldn't find the words. He knew Emily was right. He really moved away from her long before he met Lilia, but he wasn't ready to admit it out loud. Emily walked slowly to the window, her eyes directed outside, but she saw neither the garden nor the street. All she could think about was their crumbling marriage. I can't do this anymore, she said quietly but confidently. I can't live in this chaos knowing that you have a child from another woman. She stood up and approached her, his face distorted with pain and anxiety. Emily, please, give me a chance. We can make a difference. I don't want to lose you. His voice was full of despair. I still love you. Emily turned to him and her eyes met his. They showed pain, but also determination. Do you love me? She laughed bitterly. Love shouldn't look like this. You said you loved me, but you cheated on me behind my back. And now you want me to accept your child with another woman. How can you ask me that? She couldn't answer. He tried to say something, but couldn't find the words. He knew he had hurt her. He knew the situation was too complex to simply fix. Emily took a deep breath and, looking at him with a serious look, said, We need time. I have to think. We both need to understand what happens next. She wanted to object, but he knew she was right. Their worlds had collapsed, and there were no easy solutions to this situation. He felt that he was losing her every moment, but did not know how to stop this process. While Emily struggled with internal conflicts, Jacoby waited for her in the living room, his heart beating fast with excitement. He hoped that this crisis between Emily and she would be the moment when she finally decided to leave her husband. He saw her suffering and knew that with him she could find peace and happiness. When Emily returned to the living room, her face was pale but determined. Jacoby rose to meet her, his eyes burning with hope. What happened? He asked softly, approaching her. Emily looked at him, and there were so many contradictions in her gaze. She saw his sincerity, his willingness to support her, but at the same time she understood that everything was not so simple. We talked, she answered quietly, but it didn't change anything. It's all too confusing, Jacoby. She is expecting a child from another woman. This is more than I could have imagined. Jacoby felt his heart clench, but he tried to remain calm. You shouldn't stay with him if he hurts you so badly. You deserve better, Emily. You deserve to be happy. Emily looked at him, her gaze full of gratitude, but also sadness. Jacoby, you are young, and you want what feels right. But I can't just give up everything. It's not as easy as you think. Her words sounded like a sentence. Jacoby saw that her decision had not yet been made, but she was on the verge. He wanted to be her salvation. He wanted to be the one to lead her out of this chaos, but he felt that it would not be an easy path. Emily took a deep breath, her voice becoming firmer. I need time. I have to think about what happens next, and I can't do this now. I can't just make a choice that will ruin everything. Jacoby understood her, but in his heart he hoped that she would choose him. Time was their enemy, but he was willing to wait if it meant Emily would leave she and choose him. Lilia was sitting in a cafe not far from she's house, sipping hot coffee and feeling the warmth spreading inside her. She could hardly contain her smile, even despite all the intensity of passions that she had left outside the threshold of his house. Everything went exactly as she planned. Pregnancy proved to be her trump card, and she knew that she now had everything she needed to secure her place in she's life. She had her eye on the professor for a long time, from the first day he entered the audience at a university conference. His confidence, poise, and high status immediately attracted her attention. Lilia always knew what she wanted from life. She strived for success, for luxury, and to be close to a strong, influential man. And she fit this description perfectly. Their romance began almost innocently. Lilia played the long game, acting carefully so as not to show she her true interest. She saw his marriage to Emily crumbling at the seams and took every opportunity to become what he wanted. She took her time, gradually working her way to his heart, while simultaneously controlling their relationship, controlling she's emotions as if he were her puppet. But Lilia always wanted more. She knew that being just a lover was not enough for her. She dreamed of becoming his wife. For this, she needed a more serious argument, something that would connect them forever. Pregnancy became just such a decision. She never left anything to chance. When she realized that their relationship was starting to fade, that she was becoming less involved, Lilia made a conscious decision. She knew that a child would change everything. Pregnancy will be the fact that will destroy his marriage with Emily and force she to take responsibility. Even if he didn't want it, now he had no choice. Now, sitting in a cozy cafe, she remembered his confused face when she told him the news. He was stunned, but this is exactly what Lilia wanted. She saw fear in his eyes, mixed with the realization that everything was now in her hands. You won't leave me, she mentally repeated, clutching the cup. Now we are connected forever. For Lilia, it was a triumph. She felt like a winner because her plan worked. Emily was no longer a threat to her. Lilia imagined how one day she would become she's new wife, how they would live together, raise their child, how she would enjoy all the privileges that marriage with a successful and influential man brings. But Lilia was not naive. She knew there was a long road ahead. Emily would not give up without a fight, but Lilia was confident that she could defeat her in this fight. She had no doubt that she would ultimately choose her the mother of his unborn child. After all, now Lilia could offer him what Emily could not: a new life, a new chance at fatherhood, which he may have long wanted, but was afraid to admit even to himself. Lilia already imagined how her life would change. She will be by her side, taking care of her and their child. She will enter his world, the world of the academic elite, a world where she will become not just a lover, but a woman who will always stand next to him on a pedestal. And Emily, she will become a past that she will forget because their relationship has long faded away. She smiled, feeling slightly satisfied. Everything was thought out to the smallest detail. Even if she is now confused and doesn't know what to do, Lilia knew that time is on her side. Every day of pregnancy will tie him to her more and more. He won't be able to ignore his future with the child. And Emily, she'll just leave. She has no other choice, thought Lilia, enjoying her coffee. She knew Emily was in shock. In her position, Lilia would also be shocked. But Lilia always saw Emily's weaknesses: her insecurity, her fear of losing her husband, her attempts to preserve what was long ago destroyed. And Lilia knew that this was her moment. This child is my victory, she repeated to herself with satisfaction. And you, Emily, will now remain in the background. Lilia finished her coffee and headed out of the cafe, feeling her confidence grow with every step. Now she is not just a lover. She is now the mother of she's child, and soon she will take her place next to him, not temporarily, but forever. Lilia walked along the corridor of the clinic with barely contained excitement. She already imagined how she would soon become the mother of she's child, how this would change everything in her life. She dreamed of this moment, imagining holding a child in her arms and feeling her status in she's life strengthen. He will become her for real when he sees his child. But instead of joy, she suddenly felt slight anxiety. The doctor invited her into the room for an ultrasound, and Lilia lay down on the couch, feeling the cold gels spreading over her stomach. The doctor carefully moved the sensor over her skin, his face remaining expressionless. Time dragged on, and the tension in Lilia grew. She watched the screen, trying to understand what was happening. "Doctor," her voice sounded nervous. "Is something wrong?" The doctor paused, looking carefully at the screen, and then looked at Lily. His eyes were full of seriousness, and at that moment Lily's heart froze. "Lily," he began softly, "I must tell you that there is no pregnancy." The world around Lily froze. She didn't even immediately understand the meaning of these words. "What?" she exhaled. "How is it? Not pregnant, but the tests. I did the test, it showed." The doctor nodded carefully. "False positive results do happen. This may be due to hormonal imbalance, but there is nothing on the ultrasound. You are not pregnant." These words hit her like a hammer. Lily froze, feeling how everything inside her was collapsing. How is this possible? Her plan, her control of the situation, everything she built around this pregnancy, it all turned out to be a lie. "But it can't be," she whispered, peering at the monitor, which showed nothing. "I thought." The doctor offered her further tests, but Lilia no longer heard him. She stood up, feeling her world crumble. How can she now? How can I explain that she was wrong? When she left the clinic, the air around her seemed suffocating. Her hands were shaking. She must think of something. Lilia understood. If she told she the truth, everything would end. He will leave, return to Emily, and all her efforts will be in vain. "No," thought Lilia, collecting her thoughts. "I can't tell him. I have to continue." Now Lilia decided to go all the way, even if it meant that she would have to live a lie. She will continue to pretend to be pregnant until she finds a way to get she to stay with her forever. In the evening, Lilia sat in her apartment, holding the phone in her hands. She knew that she was waiting for her call. He wanted to know how the examination went, and she had to tell him something. Her heart was pounding in her chest. Lilia understood that it was a dangerous game, but there was no other way out. She dialed She's number, and after a few rings he answered. "Lily, how did it go?" His voice was full of tension. Lilia took a deep breath before starting her lie. "It's okay," she replied, trying to keep her tone calm. "Everything is confirmed. We are really expecting a baby." She heard a long sigh on the other side of the line. She was silent, and this silence made her nervous. He was shocked, perhaps even scared, but Lily hoped it was a shock from responsibility. "Okay," she finally said, and there was restrained emotion in his voice. "I think we need to discuss everything. This is not just a situation, Lilia. I have to deal with Emily, decide what to do next." Lilia clenched her teeth, but quickly changed her tone to a soft and affectionate one. "I understand. Just know that I'm here. We will get through this together." When the conversation ended, Lilia stared at the wall, feeling fear overwhelm her. She knew it would be more difficult. Her lies could ruin everything if anyone finds out the truth. But she had no intention of backing down. The only thing Lilia couldn't foresee was that her lie wouldn't remain a secret forever. Every day the tension will increase, and she and Emily will begin to notice more and more inconsistencies. Emily sank deeper into her relationship with Jacoby. After she found out about Lilia's pregnancy, she was filled with mixed feelings, pain, anger, and resentment toward she, as well as uncertainty about what to do next. The conversation with her husband was difficult, full of misunderstanding and tension, leaving Emily with an emptiness in her soul. At these moments, she found solace in the passion she felt for her young neighbor. Jacoby became her refuge. Next to him, she felt needed, desired, important. Their meetings became more and more frequent, almost ritualistic. Each new date began with intense anticipation, but now they weren't just having sex. Emily was surprised to notice that they were talking more and more often. Jacoby listened to her carefully, and she could be frank, talk about her worries and fears, about how her marriage with she was gradually coming apart at the seams. Each time, Jacoby became not only a passionate lover for her, but also something more a close friend who offered her a new, refreshing perspective on life. On one of these nights, after another attack of passion, when both were lying naked in bed, Jacoby said quietly, almost in a whisper, "I love you, Emily." These words took her by surprise. Her heart skipped a beat, and she felt a lump rise in her throat. Deep down, she knew that their connection had become more than just physical attraction. Jacoby didn't just listen to her, he admired her, appreciated her every thought, every gesture, her strength and vulnerability at the same time. He was young, full of energy, and had that spark of life that she had missed for so long in her relationship with she. Emily was silent, looking at his face in the dimness of the room. He looked at her with the same admiration as the first time, but now there was also hope in his gaze, undying, full of faith in the future. Jacoby. She slowly sat up on the bed, looking down at her hands lying on her knees. She couldn't look him in the eyes, afraid to see how her answer would break his heart. I I don't know what to say." She raised her head and met his gaze. There was understanding in Jacoby's eyes, but at the same time a slight shadow of disappointment. He was silent, giving her time to find the right words. "It's all so complicated," Emily continued, trying to speak as softly as possible. "I have she. We have a long history, and I just can't leave everything like that. I'm not ready." Jacoby did not take his eyes off her, and she saw the spark of hope slowly disappear. But despite this, he did not give up. "I understand," he said quietly. His voice trembled, but there was no reproach in it. "I just wanted you to know how I feel about you. I'm ready to wait. It is important to me that you are here now. I'm not rushing you." Emily sighed, feeling the conflict growing inside her. Jacoby was so sincere, so real that her heart sank with guilt. He was a light in her dark world, but living with him would be completely new, unknown territory. She could not imagine how to leave she despite his betrayal, despite their fading marriage. They were connected by a long life together, full of memories and common plans for the future. "Thank you for understanding," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible. "I really don't know what will happen next. Everything is so confusing." Jacoby nodded, his hand resting on her shoulder, gentle but confident. There was a promise in his touch. He wasn't going to leave, wasn't going to give up. And although Emily couldn't reciprocate his feelings right now, she felt that this moment had changed them both. She, meanwhile, continued to maintain a relationship with Lilia, but his internal conflict grew every day. His connection with her, which had once seemed like a way out of his routine, began to remind him of a trap. Each meeting with Lilia became more and more tense. He no longer felt the lightness that he had at the beginning of their romance. Pregnancy, which he perceived as a responsibility, suddenly began to put pressure on him. He began to notice that Lily increasingly demanded his attention and emotional involvement. More and more often, he caught himself thinking that he could not truly be happy with her. She manipulated him, but he still could not understand what exactly this manipulation was. Lilia felt that she was starting to pull away and tried to regain control by increasing the pressure on him. One day, when they met in her apartment, Lilia said, "We need more time together, You must choose. We're going to have a baby soon, and I can't wait any longer." She, feeling the pressure, remained silent. Doubt grew inside him. He began to notice that Lily was increasingly making him feel guilty and tied down. He began to realize that their relationship was more like a game of manipulation than love. She continued to notice oddities in Lilia's behavior. She became intrusive, her demands and manipulations began to irritate him. One day, when he came to his next meeting with her, she mentioned that she had recently been to the doctor for an examination. She asked her about the ultrasound, and Lilia began to get confused in her explanation. This alarmed him. He began to ask more questions, but Lilia quickly changed the topic. There was something subtly strange in her behavior, and this feeling haunted him. Then she decided to call the clinic himself to find out the details. Under false pretenses, he learned that Lilia had never undergone an ultrasound procedure at this clinic. This discovery came as a shock to him. He couldn't believe that Lilia could lie about such an important event. His suspicions grew stronger, and he realized that Lilia may have been manipulating him from the very beginning to keep him in her grasp. One evening, when Lilia came to him, she finally decided to talk frankly. "Lily, I know that you lied to me," he said, looking at her with seriousness. "You've never been pregnant, have you?" Lily froze, her face turned pale. She realized that her lie had been exposed, but instead of confessing, she tried to justify herself. I wanted to save our relationship. I was afraid that I would lose you." She sighed. He realized that their connection had been destroyed by lies and manipulation. He couldn't continue this game anymore. "I can't be with you, Lily. It's over." He got up and left, leaving her alone. At that moment, he felt a strange sense of relief, as if he had finally been freed from her control. Emily stood at the window, looking at the sunset. Warm orange-pink rays of the sun penetrated the glass, filling the room with soft light. Her thoughts were far away. She remembered her early years with those times when their relationship was full of passion and joy. She smiled, remembering how they spent sleepless nights, discussing dreams and plans, and building a future. But at the same time, pain washed over her. She understood that a lot had changed. When she entered the room, the silence seemed to become even denser. He stood next to her, trying to catch her eye. "Emily." His voice was quiet, almost a whisper. She didn't answer right away. Her gaze was fixed on the horizon, but her thoughts wandered somewhere in the past. "We lost each other a long time ago, she finally said. "I keep wondering at what point this happened. When did we stop being a team?" She lowered his head, realizing that she had nothing to object to. He also asked himself this question many times. "I think it happened slowly," he said. "When our lives changed, when career came first, when we stopped being each other's support." Emily looked at him, her eyes full of pain, but no longer angry. She had cried her tears a long time ago. "You cheated on me," she said. Her voice was soft, but the word cut like a knife. "And I cheated on you too. We both did it. You are with Lilia, and I am with Jacoby. But that's not what broke us." She froze. He expected these words, but hearing them was no easier. "We lost each other long before that," Emily continued. "I proposed an open marriage, not because I wanted to be with another man. I suggested this because I wanted to save us. But it didn't help. It only destroyed what was left." She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words pressing down on him. He knew Emily was right. Open relationships were their attempt to avoid real problems instead of facing them head-on. "I didn't want to lose you," he said, his voice quiet and trembling. "But at some point I got confused. I didn't know what to do. Lily was my way of moving away from what I didn't want in our marriage. She was my escape, but she was never you." Emily was silent, digesting his words. She knew that the truth had always been this way. Lilia could never replace her. But the pain of betrayal remained. "What do you want now?" she finally asked. She turned to her, his eyes full of determination. "I want to fix everything. I want to be with you. I want us to start again, Emily." His voice trembled, but he was sincere. "Lily, she is no longer a part of my life. I realized that all this time I was looking for something outside of us, when in fact I needed to deal with what was between us." Emily looked at him long and carefully. There was truth in his words, but were they ready to start over? "What about Jacoby?" she asked quietly. She froze. He knew that her relationship with Jacoby was real too, even if it was not as deep as his connection with Lilia. "I can't stop you from being with him," he finally answered, his voice full of sadness. "But I know one thing. If we have a chance to make things right, I want that chance to be with you, not with someone else." Emily turned back to the window. She felt her thoughts and emotions intertwined. She was indeed attracted to Jacoby, but she knew that it was a temporary connection. Passion and youth were tempting, but not something that could give her stability and support. "I think we need time," she finally said, "for both of us." The next day, Emily met with Jacoby. He was waiting for her at their usual place on the beach, where they often met for jogging. His face lit up when he saw her, but Emily immediately knew that this would not be an easy conversation. "Jacoby, we need to talk," she began without wasting any time. She didn't want to give false hope. He froze, his smile disappeared. "Have you made a decision?" he asked, his voice filled with worry. Emily sighed and nodded. "Yes," she answered. "You know how much I appreciate you. You gave me something that no one else has given me in these past years. But I realized that I cannot continue to live like this." Jacoby was silent. He felt his heart clench in pain. "You choose she, right?" he finally asked. Emily nodded slowly. "That doesn't mean everything will be easy," she said. "But I realized that I couldn't destroy everything that she and I had. We've been through too much together." Jacoby lowered his head, and Emily could see him struggling with his emotions. "I understand," he said, although his voice was filled with disappointment. "I always knew that you would return to him. But I was hoping that maybe I could give you what you were looking for." Emily approached him and gently touched his arm. "You gave me what I was looking for, Jacoby," she said with a smile. "But it was temporary. I have to get back to my life. I can't destroy it for a new beginning." Jacoby nodded silently, his eyes filled with tears, but he controlled himself. "I wish you happiness, Emily," he said quietly. "And if something goes wrong, you always know where to find me." Emily smiled through the tears. "Thank you, Jacoby. You have been an important part of this journey for me." They hugged goodbye, and Emily knew this chapter of her life was over. Emily sat on the edge of the bed with her head in her hands. After her conversation with Jacoby, her thoughts were in chaos, but one thing was clear: her life would never be the same again. She couldn't bring everything back. Her relationship with she had been destroyed long ago, and trying to fix it through an open marriage only made the situation worse. But despite this, she couldn't stop thinking that they needed to give themselves time. She was in the living room. He sat on the sofa, holding his head, realizing that everything had gone too far. Emily suggested taking a break to sort out her feelings, but this step seemed both right and scary. He knew that this could be the last step before the final break. But deep down, he understood that it was impossible to continue living as before. "Emily," he began quietly as she entered the room, "I agree that we need time." She walked up to him, sat down next to him, but did not look him in the eyes. "I also think this is the right decision," she answered. Her voice was even, but there was fatigue in it. "We're both confused. I feel that if we continue like this, we will completely destroy everything we had." She looked at her, his eyes full of pain and doubt. "But how will it be? Are we going to separate? Shall we stop communicating?" he asked, his voice trembling with anxiety. Emily thought about it. She didn't know what to do. Their home was full of memories, good and bad, and every corner was a reminder of what they had gone through together. "I think we need to live separately for a while," she finally said. "This does not mean that we will no longer communicate. I just feel that if we continue to live under the same roof, it will be difficult for us to truly understand ourselves." She nodded, understanding her point. He knew that this decision was not an attempt to leave, but an opportunity to understand what would happen next. "You're right," he agreed quietly, "but it will be difficult for me. Difficult to get used to the fact that you won't be around." Emily sighed, her heart sank at the words, but she knew it was necessary. "It's difficult for both of us, she admitted, "but I don't see any other way out. We have to give ourselves time and space to figure out what we need." They sat next to each other, and at that moment there was silence that spoke more than any words. It was the beginning of the end, but not the final break. They both understood that this step was an attempt to give their relationship a chance to survive, but at the same time, they knew that the chance might not work out. I'll take my things and move out for a few days, Emily suggested, looking at She. I have a place where I can stay. She nodded without arguing. He understood that this decision was necessary for both. Okay, he answered quietly. I will also think about how we will proceed further. Maybe this will give us time to figure out what we really want. It's been a few weeks since Emily moved out. She stayed in their shared home, and every day spent alone seemed endless to him. He tried to concentrate on work, but the thoughts that his marriage was on the verge of collapse did not leave him. At first, he hoped that this pause would help them both sort out their feelings and regain their former passion, but every day he realized more and more that there was only emptiness between them. Emily, meanwhile, found temporary refuge with her friend. She also tried to understand what she needed from life. Jacoby was no longer in her life, and although his absence hurt her at first, she felt relieved every day. She understood that her relationship with him was nothing more than an escape from real problems. One day, sitting over a cup of tea in a quiet coffee shop, Emily suddenly realized that she no longer felt the connection with She that she had before. All those attempts to save their marriage, restore lost trust, and love, all this turned out to be just an illusion. Their relationship had long become just a formality, memories of the past that kept them together. She thought for a long time about whether they should fight further, and the more she thought, the clearer it became that her feelings for She had changed forever. At that moment, Emily knew she needed to take the next step. She didn't want to continue living in a marriage that was based only on the past. She wanted freedom to be herself and build her life anew, without the burden of previous mistakes. Emily and She agreed to meet at the restaurant where they had their first dinner many years ago. The place was filled with memories, but now they both looked at it differently. This dinner was supposed to be their last chance to decide what would happen next. She arrived earlier and took a table by the window. He was nervous, but tried to remain confident. He knew that this conversation would determine their future. When Emily entered the restaurant, he immediately noticed her. She looked calm, but there was determination in her eyes. Hi, he said quietly as she approached the table. Hi, she answered with a smile, but the smile was forced. They ordered dinner, but no matter how hard they tried, the conversation did not work out. Both understood that this evening would be decisive, but no one wanted to start. Finally, Emily was the first to break the silence. I've been thinking for a long time, she began, choosing her words carefully, and I came to the conclusion that our marriage could no longer continue. She froze, feeling his heart clench. He knew this moment would come, but hearing it from her still hurt. Are you sure? His voice was hoarse, but there was faint hope in it. Emily nodded, her eyes full of sadness, but there was no hesitation in them. Yes, she answered firmly. I love you, but our relationship is no longer what it was before. We lost each other, and I don't think we can get it back. She lowered his head. He understood her feelings. They both knew that they had been fighting the inevitable all this time. I thought about that too, he admitted, his voice quiet. I don't want to lose you, but I understand that we have already lost each other a long time ago. They sat in silence for a long time, digesting what they had heard. Time seemed to stand still, but despite the pain, they both felt like they had finally taken the right step. I think we need to let each other go, Emily said. You deserve to be happy, and so do I. We both deserve a new life. She nodded, his eyes filling with tears. I will always remember our good moments, he said quietly. Emily couldn't hold back her tears either. Me too, You will always be an important part of my life. They took each other's hands and, despite all the years that had passed, they realized that this moment was not the end, but a new beginning. The end of their marriage meant the beginning of a new life for each of them. A few months after that fateful conversation, Emily and She divorced. This decision matured in the silence of long reflections and conversations filled with mutual understanding. Their divorce was peaceful, as if they had accepted in advance the inevitability of this step and understood that it could not be avoided. There was no longer pain or resentment in their gazes, only humility in the face of the fact that life sometimes takes unpredictable paths. They both realized that this step was necessary for their future. She returned to work at the university, immersing himself in the academic environment. Lectures, research, and meetings with colleagues filled his days, giving them structure and meaning. On campus, he became involved in many scientific projects, often staying late into the night in laboratories or in his office. The walls of the university seemed to close him off from the past, creating a new world around him, where he could forget about Lily, about the mistakes that once stained his life. From time to time, thoughts about the past came to him, but they were like distant echoes, which were soon lost in the bustle of everyday life. Emily, on the contrary, chose a path that has always been a symbol of freedom and independence for her. She bought a small but cozy house on the ocean coast, a place she had dreamed of since she was a little girl. This house, immersed in greenery, stood on a hill overlooking the endless expanses of water, where the waves gently touched the shore and sunsets painted the sky with all shades of pink and gold. Every morning she woke up to the sounds of the surf, filled with a sense of calm and tranquility that she so lacked in her previous life. Here she found silence, free from the bustle of the city and memories of the past. Walking along the sandy beach, Emily felt how the fresh sea wind brought with it not only the smell of salt, but also a feeling of new life. She began to write short stories, notes in her diary, poems that were born to the sounds of the waves. This became not just a hobby for her, but also a way to express those feelings and thoughts that had previously been hidden deep inside. Emily's life was filled with peace and harmony. She finally felt free from all attachments and regrets. It was her own world, where she could be herself without looking back at the past. Despite the breakup, she and Emily maintained a respectful and friendly relationship. From time to time, they exchanged messages, telling each other about the news in their lives. These conversations were no longer tinged with emotion, just light references to what was going on in their worlds, like old acquaintances who had once been closer than they were now. They no longer sought support or consolation in these conversations, but retained gratitude for the years they spent together. Memories of the past have become for them something like an old but expensive book. They do not open it often, but keep it on the shelf with care. Their lives took different paths, and although they no longer crossed paths, they would always remain a part of each other, custodians of the memories of the years they spent together, the dreams and experiences they shared. Time had softened the corners of their breakup, and now they looked to the future with hope and freedom. She immersed herself in her projects, exploring new horizons of science, and Emily found inspiration in every new day spent by the ocean. They both realized that divorce gave them not only a release from the past, but also an opportunity for personal growth and happiness. Now each of them could build their lives anew, seek their own happiness, and this was the most important thing. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.